Hello, and welcome back to When in Rome. My name is Mr. Naughton. I'm your host of this series, teaching you all about the civilization of ancient Rome. So, last time we talked about geography. If you need a refresher on that, go back and watch that again. The three key features were the Alps Mountains up north, the Tiber River that runs through Rome, and the 7 hills of the city of Rome. Those are going to be really important for this episode, so make sure you know about them. So, we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're going to talk about some mythic history, some legends that come out of ancient Rome, and then we'll talk about real history in early Rome, what we know, what we can prove. So, let's dive into the myth of the founding of the city of Rome, first and foremost. I have some drawings for us here today. Remember, I'm not a great artist, so we got some stick figures. So, we start off with twin brothers named Romulus and Remus. Now, these twin brothers are just babies. They were found outside of what would become the city of Rome. Remember, it hasn't been founded yet, and this is about 2, maybe even 3,000 years ago. So, we have these babies who are just abandoned. They don't know who their parents are. According to the myth and the legend, and remember, myths are stories that are passed down from family to family. So according to the myth, their parents actually came from Greece. They came from the Trojan War. If you know anything about that, that's an interesting story too. So the Romans connect their myth to Greece. They believe that these two kids originally were Greeks who, for some reason, they were abandoned. They were left in Italy until they were discovered by the she-wolf. So these two babies are going to be raised by a wolf. I know, it's a bit weird, right? So this she-wolf raises them until they're older. They start fighting and arguing. They can't decide on who's going to be the leader. So, of course, it becomes a big battle between Romulus and Remus. They can't decide who's going to be the leader of this new town they're going to set up. So they're fighting, they're arguing. Which one do you think is going to win? Romulus or Remus? I'll give you a big hint. Look at their name. Which name do you think is going to win? If you guessed Romulus, you would be right. Because look, it's even the beginning of his name. Romulus, becomes Rome. So Romulus finds some friends after he kills his brother and settles in the 7 hills of Rome, which is right next to the Tiber River. Now, the year that a lot of myths and stories give for this is 753 BCE. And this is the year that the Romans actually build their calendar around. They believe this is the starting year of Roman civilization. So for them, this would be the year 1. This is the beginning of their calendar, when Romulus sets up a town based on these 7 hills, which again are great for defense. They're not good for attacking so much, but they're really easy to defend because they're the high ground. So Romulus is the winner. He starts a town, and that's the beginning of a very famous myth involving these twin brothers. And you can even see this in Italian culture and in the city of Rome. A lot of images will have these two brothers with the she-wolf to represent kind of the beginning of the city. It's one of the city's symbols. So there's the myth. Let's dive into the actual history a little bit. I'm going to show you a little bit of a map that gives you an idea of some groups of people who are going to be coming to live here. First off, in the yellow, you have the Etruscans. In the green, you have the Latins. And in the orange, you have some Greek colonists. Now, if you think way back to ancient Greece, we know that there's some Greek people moving around the Mediterranean, setting up some colonies all around. So there's actually 3 different groups of people living in this area at this time. The Latins. They're going to be speaking a new language called Latin. Makes sense. That's the name of their ethnic group. So these Latins, they're speaking Latin. Then you have the Etruscans to the north and the Greeks to the south. Out of these 3, which one do you think are going to become Romans? Etruscans, Latins, or Greeks? Which one of these 3 become the real Romans? It's the Latins. The Latins become the real Romans. So, let's talk about these 3 groups and what exactly they're doing in Italy. Roman history isn't just about the Latins. Around 800 BCE, Greeks and Etruscans arrived in Italy. The Greeks built many colonies over the next couple hundred years. They taught the Romans to grow olives and grapes, and they also invested the Greek alphabet, and that kind of also helped the Latin language get started. So Greek sculpture, other art forms, but then this other group, the Etruscans, they had a really big influence over the Romans. Again, they came from the north. They were rich miners and traders. They had lots of artwork. They had jewelry, tools, weapons. So when the Etruscans first came to visit Rome, Rome was just a small little village with straw huts. And if you believe the mythology, it was started by that Romulus guy. So it's just a small little village. As time goes on, the Etruscans, around 650 BCE, again, a lot of these dates are kind of iffy because they're kind of hard to prove when they did not occur. So these Etruscans come in and they conquer Rome. So it's just this village, and it's part of the Etruscans. The Etruscans took over, and they taught them a lot of things. They taught them how to build temples, how to build streets and public squares. They taught them a lot of useful skills that they would use later on. The Etruscans also introduced some culture to the ancient Latins, which would become the Romans. They introduced togas, short cloaks. Do you know what a toga is? Toga is basically the sheet that wraps around your body with one end covering your shoulder, and it wraps around your whole body. It was like the jeans and t-shirt of the day. Everybody wore toga. It's just some togas were really fancy, some were very plain and simple. Togas were the common clothing, and the Etruscans were the ones who introduced it to them. More importantly, though, the Etruscans introduced how an army could be effective. Before this, the little Latins, the little village, they just had some soldiers with very simple weapons to defend themselves. The Etruscans were the ones who said, hey, you should build an army. That way you can really defend your little city. So the Romans copied a lot of ideas from the Etruscans. A lot of people even believe that some of the earliest beliefs and ideas were even stolen from the Etruscans. Something that historians actually argue about is how much of Roman culture is actually theirs versus stolen from the Etruscans or from the Greeks. As you learn later on, the Greeks have a big religious influence on the Romans, and so all of those Roman gods are just renamed Greek gods. So the Etruscans are ruling Rome for more than 100 years. Eventually, some people get pretty fed up with it. There's this guy named Brutus, who is a Latin, in other words, going to be a Roman, and he sets up this big family. Everyone's named Brutus in his family, and he believes that the Etruscans shouldn't be in charge anymore. I forgot to mention, the Etruscans, they had kings. Kings had absolute power, absolute say. So when the kings give orders and the Romans don't like it, this Brutus guy says, maybe it's time for the Etruscans to go bye-bye. So they kick out the Etruscans around the year 500 BCE. They kick them out. The Romans fight back, and they set up a new government called a republic. Now, in Greece, we learned about democracy and monarchy and oligarchy. Those were the governments we learned about in Greece, democracy. But in Rome, they're going to have what's called a republic. That's what we're going to learn about in the next video. Hope you guys enjoyed learning about early Rome, that Romulus and Remus myth, and about the beginnings of a republic. Remember, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.